Throughout history, there have been many different executioners who were employed to bring life to an end. Some of the most infamous executioners are known for their botching antics and the fact they would perform their jobs poorly. Jack Ketch, for example, was notorious across England for the fact he botched two executions very badly, and these were both very high profile. During the execution of the Duke of Monmouth, Ketch took so many swings with the axe to take his head off that the crowd became incredibly angry, seeing this very undignified end. An angry mob then broke out amongst the onlookers, and Ketch, following his disastrous work, had to be taken away from the crowd for his safety, as it was believed that the crowd wanted his head next. But there was a man in France who, during the French Revolution, took the heads of nearly 3,000 people. Charles-Henri Sanson became known as the Royal Executioner, and he was a man who executed the king. But what is his story? Join us today as we look at the execution that guillotined the French king. And as always, to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Charles-Henri Sanson was born on the 15th of February 1739 inside of Paris, and he was a fourth of a sixth-generation family dynasty who would work as executioners. It was at the time where executioners' roles were passed down throughout the family, and different sons would inherit the role as senior executioners. Charles's great-grandfather was a soldier in the French Royal Army, and he then became the executioner of Paris in 1688, and then after his death the role passed to his son, who was also named Charles. He then held this role for decades until his youngest son, again named Charles, became the executioner. But Charles-Henri Sanson was the eldest son of this man, and he did have 9 other siblings. But he became known as the Great Sanson, and he was an apprentice with his father for 20 years, and he was sworn into office as a High Executioner on the 26th of December 1778. In his early life, he had been raised in a convent school, and his father then took him out of school after there was shock amongst the parents of the other children because of his father's work as an executioner. But as a young man, he did have an aversion to the family business, and it looked unlikely that he would succeed into the job of an executioner. However, his father then became paralysed following an incident, and his grandmother forced Charles-Henri to leave his life studying medicine to become the executioner to ensure that his family survived and would not suffer financial hardship. He left his role studying to become a doctor, and he then became known as a gentleman of Paris. One of his sons, Gabriel, would work alongside him as an assistant, and he would, it's believed, inherit the role as an executioner, but he died actually during an execution, slipping off a scaffold when he went to display the severed head of the victim to the crowd. But Charles-Henri Sanson would be involved in some very high-profile executions. In 1757 he was helping his uncle with the horrific executions of the man who tried to kill the king. Robert Francois Damiens was to be pulled apart by horses, and it was incredibly brutal. But following this event, his uncle quit his role as he was so disgusted, and Charles-Henri received the blood-red coat and was considered the master executioner. He would hold this role in Paris for 17 years, and he would be succeeded by his son, but most of the executions in Paris were carried out by Sanson and his assistants. He would be the first executioner to use a guillotine, and he was then involved in inspecting the device and also carrying out the tests of it. He would experiment on the guillotine with straw bales, before he used human corpses to test it, and the guillotine was declared a huge success. But within a week of getting his blessing, the guillotine had been approved by the National Assembly for its use inside of France. The first man to be executed on the guillotine was Nicolas Jacques Pelletier, who on the 25th of April 1792 lost his head after a conviction of robbery and assault. This took place at the Place de Grève, and the guillotine became an image of the French Revolution and its beliefs of liberty and equality. Throughout this time, Charles-Henri Sanson performed the executions of 2,918 people, including even King Louis XVI. He was not particularly a strong supporter of the monarchy, but he was to begin with reluctant to take the head off the king. It was said no Monsieur de Paris had ever had the honour of executing a king, and Sanson wanted precise instructions. But he was subjected to pressure to be the man to take the life of the king. He did have the duty to do the job, and if he refused to do it, it would have harmed the financial security and the legacy of his family. Eventually, Charles-Henri Sanson gave in, and King Louis XVI's execution would be one of the most significant that he would carry out. The streets of Paris were rammed with thousands of people who wanted to see the execution of the king. The streets of Paris were lined with soldiers, and they feared a rescue attempt on the king. Louis's carriage took 2 hours to arrive at the scaffold, and it got there at 10 a.m. on the 21st of January 1793. Sanson, when he arrived at the scaffold, cut the king's hair to ensure a cleaner cut of the blade, and the king then tried to speak to the crowd, but a drum roll drowned his voice out, and Sanson then with his assistants placed him on the board before sliding this under the blade. When Sanson released the blade, the king's head was taken off, and he then held the head up to the crowd. There were accounts that his execution did not actually go well, as the blade did not sever his neck in one go. It then had to be chipped away by Sanson. He would then, on the 17th of July, execute Charlotte Corday, and following her execution, a man grabbed her head from the basket and then slapped it on the cheek. Sanson would then deny that this man was one of his assistants, but he was a man who had been hired to actually make repairs to the guillotine device. This was seen as a highly shocking moment, and the man who did this was then imprisoned for a number of months for his actions. But on the 16th of October 1793, the Queen Marie Antoinette would be executed by Charles-Henri Sanson's son, Henri. Sanson and his men also executed many other people, including Robespierre, Desmoulins, Saint-Just, and Danton. Many of these had incurred the wrath of people and had fallen from grace and power inside of France as the revolution continued. One of Sanson's greatest legacies was the fact he would be responsible for the adoption of the guillotine. As mentioned, he would own and maintain his own equipment and execution device, but his youngest son would succeed him as the executioner of Paris, and Charles-Henri Sanson handed over the office to his son officially in April 1793. He was an executioner who would take in his career the lives of around 3,000 people in front of huge crowds. During the French Revolution, there would be a huge amount of executions that took place, and each day Sanson would be releasing the blade on a new individual, whose life was taken in front of many people. He was the man who executed the king, and despite initially not wanting to do this, he was pressured to do so. But Charles-Henri Sanson is remembered today as a key figure of the French Revolution, who brutally took the head of King Louis XVI. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.